I worked at the Starbucks on Fifth Avenue in downtown Minneapolis for 2 years, and in that time, I thought I'd seen every type of customer imaginable. The morning rush business people who ordered the same drink every day, the college students who spent hours studying over a single Grand Pike place, the tourists who took forever deciding between a frappuccino and a macchiato. But there was one customer who was different from all the others, and thinking about him still keeps me awake at night. We called him the Regular, though we never knew his real name. He came in every single day at exactly 3:27 p.m., ordered the same drink, a venti dark roast, black, no room, and sat at the same table by the window for exactly 43 minutes. Then he'd leave, taking his cup with him, even though it was always empty by then. I started working there in September, and according to my manager Sarah, the Regular had been coming in every day for at least 2 years before that. She said the previous shift supervisor had mentioned him, and the assistant manager before her had stories about him too. No one could remember when he'd first started coming in. The thing about the Regular wasn't just his routine. Lots of customers have routines. It was how precise everything was. 3:27 p.m., not 3:25 or 3:30. Exactly 43 minutes, timed to the second. And he never varied, never missed a day, never seemed to age or change in any way. He looked like he was in his 40s, maybe 5'10", with thinning brown hair and clothes that seemed stuck in time. The same gray wool coat, the same black slacks, the same scuffed brown shoes. He always carried a leather briefcase that looked like it was from the 1970s, and he always sat with perfect posture, staring out the window at the street. The strangest thing was that he never seemed to actually drink his coffee. I'd watch him from behind the counter, and he'd sit there for the full 43 minutes with the cup in front of him, occasionally lifting it to his lips, but the level never went down. When he left, the cup was always full. For the first few months, I didn't think much about it. Weird customers were part of the job, and the Regular wasn't causing any problems. He was polite when he ordered, he never complained, and he always left his table clean. If anything, he was one of our better customers. But gradually, I started noticing things that bothered me, like how he never blinked. I'd catch glimpses of him while I was working, and his eyes were always wide open, staring out that window. I timed it once during a slow afternoon. I watched him for a full 10 minutes, and I never saw his eyelids move, or how he never moved his head. He'd sit there in that perfect posture, looking straight ahead, but his eyes would track people walking by outside. His eyes would move, but his head stayed completely still, like his neck was locked in place. And then there was the temperature thing. The Regular always sat at table 7, right next to the large front window. During winter, that spot was usually too cold for customers. They'd complain about the draft and ask to move to a different table. But the Regular never seemed affected by the cold. Even when the temperature outside was below 0 and we could see frost forming on the inside of the window, he'd sit there in just his wool coat, looking perfectly comfortable. I mentioned these observations to Sarah, but she just shrugged. "He's harmless," she said. "Been coming here longer than anyone can remember. Never causes any trouble. Some people are just eccentric." But it wasn't just eccentricity. There was something wrong with the Regular, something that went beyond odd behavior or social awkwardness. The first real incident happened in January, during one of the worst snowstorms Minneapolis had seen in years. The city was basically shut down. Most businesses were closed, public transportation wasn't running, and the few people who were out were struggling through knee-deep snow. We'd decided to close early that day. By 3 p.m., we'd had maybe a dozen customers, and Sarah was getting ready to lock up and send everyone home. I was wiping down the espresso machine when I looked up and saw the Regular, walking through the snow toward our door. "You've got to be kidding me," I said. Sarah looked out the window. "How is he even out there? The buses aren't running, and I can't see any cars on the street." The Regular reached our door at exactly 3:27 p.m. and knocked. Sarah hesitated for a moment, then let him in. "We're actually closing early today because of the storm," she told him. The Regular looked at her with those unblinking eyes. "Venti dark roast, black, no room," he said in his usual monotone voice. "Sir, we're closed. The espresso machine is already shut down, and we need to get our staff home safely." The regular just stood there, water from the melted snow pooling around his feet. But here's the thing, his clothes weren't wet. His coat, his pants, his shoes, they all looked completely dry despite the fact that he just walked through a blizzard. Venti dark roast, black, no room, he repeated. Sarah looked at me, then back at the regular. Okay, I can make you a dark roast from the batch brewer, but you'll need to take it to go. Table 7, the regular said. Sir, we're closing. You can't stay. The regular walked past her to table 7 and sat down in his usual position. Sarah followed him, trying to explain that we were closed, that everyone needed to leave, but he just stared out the window like she wasn't there. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The regular's reflection in the window wasn't quite right. It was there, but it was slightly off. Like it was delayed by a few seconds. Or like it belonged to someone who was almost, but not exactly, the same person. I made his coffee and brought it to the table, hoping he'd take it and leave. But he just sat there, and after a few minutes, Sarah gave up trying to get him to go. We'll wait until he leaves, she told me quietly. Lock the door and turn off the lights. Maybe he'll get the hint. But the regular didn't get the hint. He sat at table 7 for exactly 43 minutes, just like always, while Sarah and I waited by the counter in the dark. When his time was up, he stood, picked up his full cup of coffee, and walked to the door. I unlocked it for him, and he disappeared back into the blizzard. That was really weird, I said to Sarah. Yeah, she agreed. But at least he's gone. The next day, the storm had passed, and we opened normally. At 3:27 p.m., the regular came in, ordered his usual drink, and sat at table 7 like nothing had happened. After that, I started paying closer attention to him. I began keeping a notebook where I'd record his behavior, looking for any variations or clues about who he might be. What I discovered was that the regular was even more consistent than I'd initially thought. He didn't just come in at 3:27. He arrived at 3:27 and 12 seconds, every single day. His order took exactly 38 seconds to complete. He walked to table 7 in exactly 22 steps. He sat down, adjusted his briefcase, and placed his hands on the table in the exact same positions every time. And the reflection thing wasn't a one-time occurrence. Every day, I'd watch his reflection in the window, and it was always just slightly wrong. Sometimes it would lag behind his movements. Sometimes it would move when he was sitting still. Once, I swear I saw his reflection turn to look at me while the regular himself continued staring straight ahead. I started researching online, looking for any information about him. I searched missing persons databases, old newspaper archives, anything that might give me a clue about who he was or where he came from. But I couldn't find anything. No one matching his description. No unsolved disappearances. Nothing. I even tried following him once. When he left the store, I quickly grabbed my coat and went after him. But by the time I got outside, he was gone. Not walking away, not getting into a car. Just gone. The street was empty in both directions, with nowhere he could have hidden. The breakthrough came in March, when we were doing inventory after closing. I was in the back office, going through old receipts, when I found a box of records from previous years. Mixed in with the usual paperwork were some employee photos, from store events, holiday parties, grand opening celebrations, that sort of thing. In a photo from 3 years before I started working there, I saw the regular. He was standing in the background of a group shot, wearing the same gray coat, carrying the same briefcase, looking exactly the same as he did now. But according to the date on the photo, this was before he'd supposedly started coming to our store. I dug deeper and found more photos. A grand reopening event from 5 years earlier. There he was again. Same clothes, same briefcase, same appearance. A holiday party from 7 years ago. Same thing. In every photo, he looked identical, like he hadn't aged a single day. I brought the photos to Sarah. "How is this possible?" I asked her. "You said he'd been coming here for 2 years when I started, but these photos go back much further than that." Sarah studied the pictures. "I don't understand. I've only been the manager here for 3 years, and my predecessor said he'd been coming in regularly since before she started. But if these photos are real..." "They're real," I said. Look at the backgrounds, the other people. These are definitely from our store, from the dates shown. So he's been coming here for at least 7 years, looking exactly the same, maybe longer. These are just the photos we happen to keep. That night, I went home and did more research. I expanded my search to include older newspaper archives, historical records, anything I could find about the building our Starbucks was in. What I discovered made everything much worse. The building had housed a coffee shop since 1958, long before Starbucks existed. First, it was a local place called Murphy's Coffee House. Then it became the Daily Grind in the 70s. Then Java Junction in the 80s, before finally becoming a Starbucks in the late 90s. I found old newspaper articles about each of these businesses. Murphy's Coffee House had closed suddenly in 1967 after what the paper described as a series of unexplained incidents involving a regular customer. The Daily Grind had lasted longer, but there were several police reports from the 70s about disturbances involving an unidentified man who frequented the shop. Java Junction had closed after the owner reported that a customer had been coming in daily for years, without ever seeming to age. Every description matched the regular. Same physical appearance, same routine, same time of day. I was dealing with someone, or something, that had been coming to this same location for over 60 years, outlasting multiple businesses, never changing, never aging, never breaking his routine. I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't sure what. The regular wasn't hurting anyone, wasn't threatening customers or staff. He was just there, every day, forever. But the more I learned about him, the more unsettled I became. I started having trouble sleeping, wondering what would happen if I tried to break his routine. What if I refused to serve him? What if I was working alone when he came in? What if something happened to interrupt his 43-minute stay? The answer came in April. I was working a late shift, covering for a coworker who'd called in sick. It was just me and Jake, one of our part-time baristas, when the regular came in at his usual time. Jake was new, only a few weeks on the job, and he didn't know about the regular's routine. Everything started normally. The regular ordered his usual drink, I made it, and he went to sit at table 7. But about 20 minutes into his stay, a group of college students came in and, not knowing any better, sat at table 8, right next to the regular. They were loud, laughing and talking, playing music from their phones. Normally, this wouldn't be a problem. We were a coffee shop, not a library. But I could see the regular becoming agitated. His perfect posture started to slip. His hands, which were always placed in exactly the same position on the table, began to twitch. "Hey, Jake," I said quietly. "Could you ask those students to keep it down a bit?" But before Jake could move, one of the students accidentally bumped into the regular's table, knocking over his coffee cup. The regular stood up immediately. Not the slow, deliberate movement he always made when his 43 minutes were up, but a quick, jerky motion that looked wrong, like a marionette being pulled by its strings. "I'm sorry, man," the student said, reaching for napkins to clean up the spilled coffee. "Let me get that for you." The regular turned to look at the student, and for the first time since I'd been working there, I saw him make direct eye contact with another person. His unblinking eyes fixed on the student's face, and his mouth opened as if he was going to speak. But no sound came out. Instead, the air in the cafe became thick and cold, like we'd suddenly been plunged into a freezer. The lights flickered, and everyone in the store, the students, Jake, the other customers, froze in place like statues. Everyone except me. I could move, I could breathe, but I was the only one. The college students were frozen mid-laugh. Jake was stuck reaching for a rag behind the counter, and the other customers were like mannequins in their seats. The regular turned his attention to me. He walked over to the counter, his movements still wrong and jerky, like he was fighting against invisible restraints. "Venti dark roast, black, no room," he said, but his voice was different. Hollow, like it was coming from somewhere far away. I already made your coffee," I managed to say. "Venti dark roast, black, no room," he repeated, louder this time. The lights flickered again, and I heard a sound like breaking glass, though nothing in the store seemed to be broken. The temperature dropped even further. and I could see my breath forming clouds in the frigid air. I realized what he wanted. His routine had been disrupted, and he needed it to be restored. The spilled coffee, the interruption, the deviation from his normal 43-minute stay, it had thrown off whatever force or compulsion kept him in this endless loop. With trembling hands, I made another venti dark roast. Black, no room, exactly the way I'd made it hundreds of times before. I placed it on the counter, and the regular picked it up. He walked back to table 7, sat down in his exact position, and placed the cup in the exact spot where it always went. The moment he did, the cafe warmed up, the lights stopped flickering, and everyone unfroze. The college students continued their conversation as if nothing had happened. Jake went back to cleaning. The other customers resumed their activities. No one seemed to have any memory of being frozen, of the cold, of anything unusual happening. Except me. The regular stayed for exactly 43 minutes from the time he'd sat back down, then left as usual, taking his full cup with him. That night, I went home and wrote my resignation letter. I turned it in the next morning, told Sarah I was moving back home to help with a family situation. She was sorry to see me go, but she understood. I worked out my 2 weeks' notice, but I made sure I was never scheduled during the regulars' time. On my last day, Sarah asked me to train my replacement on the afternoon shift procedures. Just so you know, I told the new guy, we have a regular customer who comes in every day at 3:27. Venti dark roast, black, no room. He sits at table 7 for 43 minutes. Don't disturb him. Don't try to clean his table while he's there. And whatever you do, don't let anything interrupt his routine. Okay, the new guy said. Sounds simple enough. What's his name? We don't know, I said. We just call him the regular. I moved to Seattle a month later, found a job at a marketing firm, and tried to put the whole experience behind me. But I still think about him sometimes, still wonder what he is and why he's trapped in that endless routine. Last week, I was back in Minneapolis visiting friends, and I decided to walk by the old Starbucks. It looked exactly the same from the outside. Through the window, I could see the same tables, the same layout, the same afternoon crowd. And there, at table 7, sitting in perfect posture with a venti dark roast in front of him, was the regular. Same gray coat, same briefcase, same unblinking stare out the window. I checked my phone. It was 3:45 p.m., which meant he had 25 minutes left in his stay. I thought about going in, ordering a coffee, maybe sitting at a nearby table to see if anything had changed. But then I remembered that night in April, the way the air had turned cold, the way everyone had frozen, except me. Instead, I walked away. Some routines are meant to be left undisturbed. But as I headed down the street, I couldn't shake the feeling that the regular had seen me through the window, that those unblinking eyes had tracked my movement as I passed by. And I realized that while I might have escaped his routine, I'd never really escaped the memory of it. Just like him, I was trapped in my own kind of loop, forever wondering what would happen if someone tried to break his pattern, forever remembering the sound of silence when time stopped in that coffee shop. I still don't drink coffee. I probably never will again. I was the opening shift supervisor at a Starbucks in Riverside, California, and I thought I'd seen every possible way the mobile order system could glitch. Orders placed at the wrong store, duplicate orders charging customers twice, drinks ordered for pickup times in the past. The app had issues, but we'd learned to work around them. What happened last October was different, though. It wasn't just a glitch. It was something that made me question whether our technology was connecting to places it shouldn't. The store I managed was in a strip mall on Magnolia Avenue, sandwiched between a nail salon and a fitness center. We were a standard company-operated location, not particularly busy, but we had a steady stream of regulars and mobile orders throughout the day. I'd been working there for 3 years, and the last 18 months as a supervisor. The incident started on a Tuesday morning in October. I'd opened the store at 5 a.m. like always, run through the standard procedures, turned on equipment, checked inventory, started the first batch of Pike Place. My opening partner that day was Jessica, a college student who'd been with us for about 6 months. Good worker, reliable, never caused any drama. Around 6:30, during the morning rush, our mobile order screen started showing an unusual pickup request. The customer name was listed as Margaret Liu, and she'd ordered a venti caramel macchiato with an extra shot and oat milk. Nothing weird about the drink itself, but the pickup time was listed as 5:47 a.m. "That's weird," Jessica said, pointing at the screen. "That would have been before we even opened." I looked at the order details. It showed it had been placed at 5:42 a.m., with a requested pickup time of 5:47 a.m. But we don't open until 5 a.m., and it takes at least 15 minutes to get everything ready for customers. There's no way we could have fulfilled an order that early. "Must be a system error," I said. "Go ahead and make the drink. Maybe she placed it for today, but the app messed up the time." Jessica made the caramel macchiato and set it on the mobile order pickup counter with Margaret Liu's name. We went about our morning routine, but the drink sat there untouched. By noon, it was obvious no one was coming for it. So we marked it as unclaimed and disposed of it. The next morning, the same thing happened. Margaret Liu, venti caramel macchiato with an extra shot and oat milk, ordered at 5:42 a.m. for pickup at 5:47 a.m. Jessica made the drink again, and again, no one came to collect it. "Maybe we should call the customer," Jessica suggested. I pulled up Margaret Liu's information in our system, but there was no phone number listed, which was unusual. Mobile orders typically require a phone number for account verification. The only information we had was a first name, last name, and the fact that the order was paid for through the app. On Thursday, the same order came through at exactly the same time. By now, I was getting curious enough to do some investigating. I called our district manager to ask about unusual mobile orders. "Have you had any other stores report orders placed before opening time?" I asked. "Not that I'm aware of," he said. "Could be a glitch in the timestamp system. Are the orders being paid for?" "Yes, payment goes through normally." "Then fulfill them if you can. If no one picks them up, follow standard unclaimed procedures." But this didn't feel like a standard situation. The precision of it bothered me. Same customer, same drink, same exact times, 3 days in a row. I started checking our security footage to see if anyone had come in looking for a mobile order that we might have missed. Thursday's footage showed our usual morning customers, but no one matching the name Margaret Liu, and no one asking about an unclaimed mobile order. I went back and checked Wednesday and Tuesday's footage. Same thing. No Margaret Liu. No one looking for that specific drink. On Friday, I decided to be ready for the order. At 5:41 a.m., I had Jessica standing by the espresso machine, ready to start the caramel macchiato the moment the order came through. Sure enough, at 5:42 a.m., Margaret Liu's order appeared on our screen. Jessica started making the drink immediately. Extra shot, oat milk, caramel macchiato preparation, everything done as quickly as possible. She had it finished by 5:45 a.m. and placed it on the pickup counter with Margaret's name. At exactly 5:47 a.m., the drink disappeared. Not picked up by a customer. Disappeared. Jessica and I were both watching the pickup counter, and one moment the drink was there. The next moment it was gone. No one had approached the counter. No one had been anywhere near it. "Did you see that?" Jessica asked, staring at the empty spot where the cup had been. "Yeah," I said, though I wasn't sure what I'd seen. Someone must have taken it when we weren't looking." But we had been looking. We'd both been watching the counter, waiting to see who Margaret Liu was. I checked the security cameras immediately. The footage showed Jessica placing the drink on the counter at 5:45 a.m. At 5:47 a.m., the cup simply vanished from the frame. No customer, no movement, no explanation. "This is really weird," Jessica said. I agreed, but I didn't know what to do about it. Report a disappearing coffee cup to my district manager? File a police report about a customer who might not exist? It sounded crazy. Over the weekend, I did some research. I looked up Margaret Liu online, searched social media, checked public records for the Riverside area. I found several people with that name, but none of them matched our mysterious customer profile, and none of them had any connection to our store. Monday morning, the order came through again. Same time, same drink, same customer. This time, I had a plan. I'd brought my personal smartphone to work and set it up to record video. When the order came through at 5:42 a.m., I started recording while Jessica made the drink. I kept the camera focused on the pickup counter from 5:45 a.m. onward. At 5:47 a.m., the cup disappeared again. But this time, I had it on video. When I reviewed the footage later, what I saw made my stomach turn. The cup didn't just vanish, it was picked up by someone. But the someone wasn't visible. You could see the cup lift off the counter, move through the air as if carried by invisible hands, and disappear out of frame toward the door. "Show me that again," Jessica said when I showed her the video. I played it 3 more times. Each time, we watched an invisible person pick up Margaret Liu's caramel macchiato and carry it away. "What do we do?" Jessica asked. "I don't know," I said, "but I don't think we should make the drink anymore." Tuesday morning, I decided to test my theory. When Margaret Liu's order came through at 5:42 a.m., I didn't have Jessica make it. I marked it as out-of-stock ingredients and left it unfulfilled. At 5:47 a.m., things got strange. The temperature in the store dropped noticeably. The espresso machine started making grinding noises even though no one was using it. The music playing over our sound system became staticky and distorted. And Jessica, who was working at the register, suddenly stopped what she was doing and walked over to the espresso machine. "Jessica," I said. She didn't respond. She started making a caramel macchiato, her movements mechanical and precise, like she was following programming rather than conscious thought. "Jessica, what are you doing?" She continued making the drink without acknowledging me. Extra shot, oat milk, perfect caramel drizzle. When she finished, she walked to the pickup counter and set it down with a label that read, "Margaret Liu." At exactly 5:47 a.m., the cup disappeared, carried away by invisible hands. The moment it was gone, Jessica blinked and looked around confused. "What happened?" she asked. "Why am I over here?" "You don't remember making that drink?" "What drink?" "I was working on inventory at the register." I showed her the security footage from the past few minutes. Jessica watched herself make the caramel macchiato with no memory of doing it. "That's not possible," she said. "I don't remember any of that." But the evidence was right there on camera. Something had compelled Jessica to fulfill Margaret Liu's order, even when I'd tried to prevent it. Wednesday morning, I called in sick and asked Jessica to open with Derek, one of our part-time baristas. I wanted to see what would happen if I wasn't there to try to interfere with the order. Thursday, Jessica told me what had happened. "The order came through like always," she said. "Derek didn't know about the whole Margaret Liu situation, so he just made the drink normally. It disappeared at 5:47 a.m., and Derek thought a customer had picked it up when he wasn't looking." "Nothing unusual? No temperature changes? No weird behavior?" "Nope. Everything was normal when you weren't there." That's when I realized the truth. The invisible customer, the compelled behavior, the strange phenomena. It only happened when I tried to interfere with Margaret Liu's order. As long as the drink was made and placed on the counter by 5:47 a.m., everything proceeded normally. But the moment I tried to disrupt the routine, things got supernatural. I spent the rest of the week researching the history of our location. The strip mall had been built in 1987, but before that, the land had been part of a residential neighborhood. I found old city records showing that a house had stood on the exact spot where our Starbucks was located. In the Riverside Public Library's local history section, I found a newspaper article from 1985 about a house fire on what was now Magnolia Avenue. The article mentioned that the fire had occurred at 5:47 a.m. and that one victim, Margaret Liu, age 34, had died of smoke inhalation. Margaret Liu had been getting ready for work, making her morning coffee, when an electrical fire started in the kitchen. She'd died clutching her coffee mug, trying to escape through the front door. The house had been demolished after the fire, and the strip mall had been built 2 years later. Our Starbucks occupied the exact location where Margaret Liu's kitchen had been. I realized what was happening. Margaret Liu was still trying to have her morning coffee, still following the routine she'd had for years before the fire. The mobile order system had somehow connected to her presence, allowing her to place orders through an app that didn't exist when she was alive. And every morning at 5:47 a.m., the exact time she'd died, she came to collect the coffee she'd never been able to finish. The question was, what should I do about it? Margaret wasn't hurting anyone. The drinks were paid for through the app, so the store wasn't losing money. She wasn't disturbing customers or causing problems. She was just trying to get her morning coffee, the same routine she'd probably followed for years before the fire. But the compulsion aspect bothered me. The way Jessica had been forced to make the drink when I tried to interfere, the temperature changes, the equipment malfunctions. It suggested that Margaret's presence was more powerful than just a simple ghost story. I decided to test the limits of what would happen if I tried to communicate with her. Friday morning, I prepared for Margaret's order as usual. When it came through at 5:42 a.m., I had Jessica make the drink normally, but instead of just placing it on the pickup counter, I also put a note next to it. "Hello, Margaret," the note read. "We know you're here. Is there anything you need besides your coffee?" At 5:47 a.m., both the cup and the note disappeared. Saturday morning, there was a response. Placed on the pickup counter, written in condensation on the metal surface as if someone had traced the words with a wet finger, was a single word: home. The message faded quickly, but I managed to photograph it before it disappeared completely. Margaret Liu wasn't just trying to get her morning coffee. She was trying to go home, back to the house that no longer existed, back to the kitchen where she died, back to the life that had been cut short by an electrical fire. But how do you help a ghost go home when home has been demolished and replaced by a strip mall? I spent the weekend thinking about it, and by Monday, I had an idea. I researched Margaret Liu's family, using the information from the newspaper article about the fire. I found an obituary that mentioned she'd been survived by a sister, Linda Chen, who lived in Los Angeles. It took some detective work, but I managed to find Linda Chen's current contact information. She was now in her 70s, retired, living in a senior community in Pasadena. I called her, not sure how to explain the situation. "Mrs. Chen, this is going to sound strange, but I'm calling about your sister Margaret." There was a long pause. Margaret died in a house fire over 30 years ago. I know. I'm the manager of a Starbucks that's built where her house used to be, and I think she's still there. I explained the situation as carefully as I could. The mobile orders, the disappearing drinks, the compulsion behavior. I expected Linda to hang up on me, but instead, she listened quietly. Margaret always was stubborn about her routines, Linda said when I finished. She had the same morning schedule every day, up at 5:30, coffee by 5:45, out the door by 6. Never varied, not once in all the years I knew her. Do you think there's anything that might help her move on? Linda was quiet for a long time. There might be. Margaret had a coffee mug that she used every morning, a blue ceramic one with a white handle. She'd had it since college, and she was very particular about using that specific mug. It was never found after the fire. We always assumed it was destroyed. What do you think would happen if we found a similar mug? I don't know. But Margaret was always very attached to her routines, her familiar things. Maybe if she had her proper mug. Linda agreed to drive out to Riverside the following week. She brought with her an old photo of Margaret and a blue ceramic mug that was identical to the one Margaret had used. "I found this at an antique shop," Linda explained. "Same brand, same style. If Margaret's really still there, maybe this will help." Tuesday morning, I placed the blue mug on the pickup counter next to Margaret's regular order. When the caramel macchiato disappeared at 5:47 a.m., the mug went with it. Wednesday morning, there was no mobile order from Margaret Liu. There hasn't been one since. I still work at that Starbucks, though I've been promoted to assistant manager. We get the usual mobile order glitches, wrong pickup times, duplicate orders, customers who forget to pick up their drinks. But nothing supernatural, nothing that defies explanation. Sometimes, on quiet mornings around 5:47 a.m., I think I catch a whiff of caramel and coffee in the air, even when we haven't made any caramel macchiatos yet. And sometimes, the espresso machine makes a soft humming sound that almost sounds like someone humming contentedly. I like to think Margaret Liu finally made it home, wherever home is for someone who died over 30 years ago. Maybe she's in a kitchen somewhere that exists outside of time, finally able to finish her morning coffee in peace. Or maybe she just needed someone to acknowledge that she was still there, still following her routine, still trying to start her day the way she always had. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone, living or dead, is simply to see them. The blue mug never reappeared, and Linda Chen sent me a thank you card a few weeks later. She said she'd had dreams about Margaret for the first time in years, and in the dreams, Margaret was smiling, holding a blue coffee mug in a kitchen filled with warm morning light. I keep Margaret's story to myself mostly. New employees don't need to know about the ghost who used to order caramel macchiatos. But sometimes, when we're training someone on mobile orders, I make sure to mention that if they ever get an order that seems impossible or unusual, they should just fulfill it anyway. You never know who might be waiting for their coffee, or how long they've been waiting to go home. I worked the overnight shift at a 24-hour Starbucks in downtown Phoenix for 8 months, and I thought I knew what to expect from the late-night crowd. Insomniacs getting their caffeine fix, hospital workers grabbing coffee between shifts, college students pulling all-nighters, and the occasional drunk person who wandered in thinking we were a fast food place. What I didn't expect was to become part of something that still makes me question my own sanity. The store was located on Central Avenue, just a few blocks from the medical district. We were one of only 3 24-hour Starbucks locations in the Phoenix metro area, which meant we got customers from all over the city during the overnight hours. The clientele was definitely different from the day shift, quieter, more tired, often a little strange. But that was normal for overnight retail work. My name is Alex, and I'd been working for Starbucks for about 2 years when I transferred to the overnight shift. The pay differential was decent, and I preferred the slower pace compared to the morning rush. Plus, I'm naturally a night owl, so staying awake until 6 a.m. wasn't a problem for me. The overnight shift was usually just 2 people, myself and whoever was scheduled as my partner. We'd handle the occasional customer, do deep cleaning tasks, receive deliveries, and prep for the morning rush. Most nights were pretty routine. My regular partner was a woman named Diana, probably in her 40s, who'd been working overnights at various Starbucks locations for over 10 years. She knew every procedure, every cleaning protocol, every way to make the long hours pass more quickly. Diana was also the one who first told me about the sleepwalkers. "You'll see them eventually," she said during my 3rd week on overnight shift. "They usually start showing up around 2 or 3 a.m. Don't try to wake them up, don't ask them questions, just make their drinks and let them leave." Sleepwalkers? People who come in while they're asleep. Sounds crazy, I know, but you'll understand when you see it. I thought Diana was either joking or exaggerating until I encountered my first sleepwalker about a month into the job. It was a Tuesday night, around 2:30 a.m. Diana and I were restocking the pastry case when I heard the door chime. A woman walked in wearing pajama pants and an oversized t-shirt, no shoes, her hair messy like she'd just gotten out of bed. She approached the counter with a blank expression, moving slowly but purposefully. "Can I help you?" I asked. "Grande vanilla latte, extra hot, no foam," she said in a monotone voice, not making eye contact. I looked at Diana, who nodded toward the espresso machine. I made the drink while the woman stood perfectly still at the counter, staring straight ahead. When I handed her the latte, she took it without acknowledgement, placed exact change on the counter, and walked out. "Was she sleepwalking?" I asked Diana. "Yep. Happens more often than you'd think. This location gets maybe 3 or 4 sleepwalkers a week. Shouldn't we try to wake her up? Make sure she gets home safely?" Diana shook her head. Learned that lesson the hard way years ago. Waking up a sleepwalker in an unfamiliar place can cause panic attacks, disorientation. Sometimes they get violent. Better to just let them complete whatever routine their subconscious is following. Over the next few weeks, I saw more of them. A teenage boy who came in every Thursday around 3 a.m. for a hot chocolate, still wearing his school uniform. An elderly man who ordered black coffee and sat at the same table for exactly 20 minutes before leaving. A middle-aged woman who bought a scone but never ate it, just carried it with her as she wandered back out into the night. They all had the same characteristics: blank expressions, monotone voices, precise routines, and no apparent awareness of their surroundings. Diana said most of them were probably regulars during their waking hours, following the same patterns their conscious minds had established. "The brain is weird," she explained. Sometimes when people are really stressed or have disrupted sleep patterns, their subconscious takes over and makes them act out familiar routines. Coffee shops, grocery stores, gas stations were all part of their mental map. It made sense, I supposed. And the sleepwalkers weren't causing any problems. They ordered simple drinks, paid correctly, and left without incident. If anything, they were easier to deal with than some of our fully conscious customers. But about 3 months into my overnight shift, the sleepwalkers started changing. It began with small things. The teenage boy who usually ordered hot chocolate started asking for drinks that weren't on our menu. Things like memory foam macchiato or lucid dream latte. When I told him we didn't have those items, he'd stand there for a moment, then order his usual hot chocolate and leave. The elderly man who always sat at the same table started talking to people who weren't there. I'd hear him having conversations, but when I looked over, he was alone. The words were always too quiet to make out clearly, but the tone sounded like he was arguing with someone. And the middle-aged woman with the scone started bringing things with her, objects that she'd place on the counter before ordering. A child's toy, a photo in a frame, a small jewelry box. She'd arrange them carefully, order her scone, then gather everything up and leave. "Have you noticed the sleepwalkers acting differently lately?" I asked Diana. "A little," she admitted. "But sleepwalking behavior can change based on stress, medication, life circumstances. It's probably nothing to worry about." But I was starting to worry, especially after what happened with the new sleepwalker. She first appeared on a Friday night in early December. A woman in her 30s, wearing a hospital gown and nothing else, no shoes, no jacket, despite the fact that it was 45 degrees outside. She moved with the same blank expression and purposeful stride as the other sleepwalkers. "Can I help you?" I asked when she reached the counter. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. "He's coming," she said finally. "I'm sorry? He's coming soon. You need to be ready." "Who's coming? Are you okay? Do you need me to call someone?" But she'd already turned and walked out, disappearing into the night. Diana had been in the back room during this encounter, and when I told her about it, she frowned. "That's not typical sleepwalker behavior," she said. "They usually follow specific routines, not random statements." The hospital gown woman came back the next night, and the night after that. Each time, she'd approach the counter and deliver a different cryptic message. "The others are gathering. Time is running backwards here. Don't trust what you see in the mirrors." I started keeping a notebook, writing down what she said each night. The messages were disturbing, but they also felt like warnings, like she was trying to tell me something important. After about a week of these encounters, I decided to follow her when she left. I waited until Diana was busy with inventory, then slipped out after the hospital gown woman. She walked slowly down Central Avenue, moving with that same purposeful but zombie-like gait. I followed at a distance, watching as she turned down a side street and entered an apartment building about 4 blocks from our store. The next day, I looked up the address online. It was a low-income housing complex, nothing unusual about it. But I was curious enough to drive by during the day to see if I could spot the woman in one of the windows. What I saw made my stomach drop. There was a small memorial on the sidewalk in front of the building. Flowers, candles, a framed photo. I got out of my car to look closer. The photo showed the woman from the hospital gown, smiling, very much alive. According to the memorial plaque, her name was Sarah Martinez, and she died 2 months earlier. Died in her sleep from complications related to a chronic illness. I was seeing a dead woman walk into our Starbucks every night. That evening, I told Diana what I'd discovered. "That's impossible," she said. "Dead people don't sleepwalk." "Then how do you explain what I saw?" "Maybe it's someone who looks similar. Maybe the memorial is old, or for someone else." But when Sarah Martinez appeared that night, I was certain it was the same person from the photo. Same face, same build, same hospital gown she'd probably died wearing. "The boundary is weakening," she told me that night. "Soon, you'll see all of us." "All of who?" "The ones who never woke up." She turned and left before I could ask any more questions. I started researching the other sleepwalkers, trying to find out who they were, and whether they might also be dead. It took some detective work, But what I found was deeply disturbing. The teenage boy who ordered hot chocolate had died in a car accident 3 years earlier while driving home from a late-night job at a movie theater. According to the accident report, he'd fallen asleep at the wheel. The elderly man who sat at the same table had died in his sleep 6 months ago, in a nursing home about 2 miles from our store. The middle-aged woman with the scone had overdosed on sleeping pills 4 years earlier, ruled a suicide. All of them had died while sleeping or in sleep-related circumstances, and all of them were continuing their routines in death, drawn to places they'd visited in life. "Diana," I said the next night, "I think our sleepwalkers are actually dead people." Diana laughed, but it sounded forced. "That's ridiculous. Ghosts don't order coffee." "How long have you been working the overnight shift?" "About 10 years, across different locations." "And you've always seen sleepwalkers?" "Yeah. It's pretty common in 24-hour establishments." "Have you ever tried to research them? Find out who they are?" Diana was quiet for a long moment. "No," she said finally. "I figured it was better not to know." That's when I realized Diana had probably suspected the truth for years, but had chosen to ignore it. Working overnight in a 24-hour coffee shop, serving drinks to dead people who were still following their earthly routines. The situation escalated the following week. Instead of our usual 3 or 4 sleepwalkers per night, we started getting dozens. They'd come in waves, mostly between 2 and 4 a.m., all with the same blank expressions and purposeful movements. Some ordered drinks that didn't exist, others just stood at the counter without speaking. A few wandered around the store touching things before leaving. Diana and I were overwhelmed. We couldn't make drinks fast enough, couldn't process all the orders, couldn't keep track of who wanted what, and many of the sleepwalkers were becoming agitated when we couldn't fulfill their requests. "This is getting out of hand," Diana said as we watched a group of 12 sleepwalkers mill around the store, some sitting at tables, others standing in line, all of them completely silent. "Maybe we should call our district manager," I suggested. "And tell him what? That we're being overrun by dead customers?" That's when Sarah Martinez approached the counter. Unlike the other sleepwalkers, she looked directly at me when she spoke. "It's almost time," she said. "Time for what?" "The gathering. We've been calling to each other, spreading the word. Tonight, we all come home. Home? To the places we remember. The routines that kept us grounded when we were alive." She gestured toward the other sleepwalkers in the store. "We've been lost, wandering, trying to find our way back to the familiar patterns. But this place, this time of night, it's thin here. The boundary between sleeping and waking, between life and death. What do you want from us?" "Just acknowledgement. Just someone to see us, to serve us, to let us complete our routines one last time." Over the next hour, more sleepwalkers arrived. They filled every table, stood in every corner, formed a line that stretched out the door. All of them waiting patiently, quietly, for their turn at the counter. Diana and I worked frantically, making drinks, heating pastries, taking payments in exact change that appeared from nowhere. The sleepwalkers who received their orders would sit at tables or stand by windows, holding their drinks, but never consuming them. Around 4 a.m., something changed. The sleepwalkers started to fade, becoming translucent, then disappearing entirely. One by one, they completed their routines and vanished, until only Sarah Martinez remained. "Thank you," she said, holding a cup of coffee that I couldn't remember making for her. "We needed this. We needed to feel normal again, just for a little while." "Will you be back?" "Number, we've said goodbye now. We can rest." She faded away like the others, leaving Diana and me alone in the empty store. We never spoke about what happened that night. Diana transferred to day shift a week later, and I put in my notice shortly after that. The overnight shift was covered by new employees who, according to other partners I talked to, reported normal, quiet nights with only the occasional insomniac customer. I still work for Starbucks, but only day shifts now. Only in busy locations where there's no time to think about the strange encounters that happen in the dark hours. But sometimes, when I'm making a drink and the steam wand creates that particular hissing sound, I remember the night we served coffee to the dead. I think about Sarah Martinez and her message about boundaries being thin in certain places at certain times. I think about the other sleepwalkers who just wanted to complete their familiar routines one more time before moving on to whatever comes next. And I wonder if Diana was right to avoid researching the customers we served. Maybe some jobs require a certain amount of willful ignorance, a decision not to look too closely at the people who come to you in the middle of the night, desperate for something ordinary and comforting in a world that no longer makes sense to them, whether they're alive or dead.